My name is Jim, and I am an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to see you all here today. This is an hour and a half meeting. We take a 10-minute break at the halfway point. And in this meeting, we are studying ways and means of better sponsorship. And also, we're helping ourselves to learn the big book and the program in a way that will make our recovery better, more complete. So let's start the meeting with a moment of silent meditation, and we'll say the Serenity Prayer together. Thank you. Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. And Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. They may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And there are no dues or fees for any membership. We are self-supporting to our own contribution. They are not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. I wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober, help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. The primary purpose of an Alcoholics Anonymous group is the teaching and practice of the 12 steps. That's something we should all keep in mind at all times. The teaching and practice of the 12 steps. That's our purpose. That's why we're here. That's the method of recovery which we have here in AA. And it is the method of recovery which we teach to our sponsees, and that we live in our own lives, so that as examples of God working in us, we can be most helpful to others. Now it's customary and traditional in our little group to read a portion of chapter 5 in the Big Book. Please open your books up to page 58. Tom's going to read it for us, and we'll follow along silently.
My name is Tom, I'm an alcoholic. This is how AA works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has still followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. It's usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates, they're not at fault, they seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And some of these we bought. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. Until the earnestness of our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us try to hold on to old ideas, and there's always a nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power, that one is God. May you find him now. After we develop nothing. Instead of a turning point, we ask for protection and care of complete advantage. Here are the steps we took which are suggested in the program we have. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, their lives had become a mandate. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God and to ourselves and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. Step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening and resolved these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaim, "What an order, I can't go through it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along the spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the Chapter Gnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholics and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could ever lead our alcoholism. And C, that God's human will to resolve.
Good. Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Sean. Okay, today we're going to continue our study of the Big Book with the doctor's opinion. Before we get into what the book says, let's take a look at this doctor's opinion and what it stands for, what importance it has. First of all, I think it's fair and safe to say that Dr. Silkworth, in writing this opinion, ought to have had the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1940. Obviously, he did not get that. He broke new ground. He broke it in such a way that there could be no doubt what he was saying. He ran directly against the tide of medical opinion right across the board. Medical people had always considered alcoholism to be just another mental condition, or that it was a reflection of the weakness of the person's personality, or a lack of willpower, or a lack of a religious commitment. There was always a tinge of evil associated with alcoholism. And beyond the evil, there was also a very strong vein of derision, sarcasm, and ridicule. I can remember the days when a drunk was portrayed on the radio or on television, and on the movies, by people who made their living doing that, and everybody laughed. It was not considered to be wrong to laugh at a drunk. It was everybody's right to laugh at the drunk and to sneer at him or her, because nobody understood that the alcoholic, the drunk, was a very, very, very sick person. One doctor in the 1800s tried to put forth this concept of alcoholism being an illness. This man was a French doctor. I don't remember his name right now. He wrote an article which was published in the equivalent of the Journal of American Medical Association in France, one of the prestigious medical journals. And it was published, and this man was laughed out of countenance. I mean, it was, what happened to him was a shame, because he was sneered at, he was derided, he was lambasted in print. They wanted to railroad him out of the profession. So he pulled in his horns, and he just never said another word about it. Until 1939, 1940, when this book was published, not another medical person had ever dared to present this concept of alcoholism until Dr. Silkworth did it. There's more to the significance of this opinion than perhaps meets the eye. Think about, why is it first in the book? Why is it not included as some kind of an appendix? Or perhaps in a later chapter. There's a very good reason for that. Because the doctor's opinion forms the basic bulwark of the whole concept of the big book. Let's think about that for a second. What is this big book all about, really? Why did it have to be written? Why is it that AA was necessary in the first place? Why couldn't people just quit drinking? Or maybe go to a particular church and be saved, and therefore they would stop drinking. Or call upon the saints, or be shriven, or whatever else was happening out there in the world of religion, and therefore they would stop drinking. And that wasn't happening. It never has happened, as a matter of fact. Maybe in rare cases. So what is the significance of what Dr. Silkworth wrote? We have to start off with what he has taught us. That we alcoholics are afflicted with an illness, an ailment, a disease. And then in describing this disease, he describes it as being one of the body and of the mind. And that part of the disease which is bodily in nature takes the form of a kind of an allergy. And he's, over the years, the 30 years of working in the field and being director of Towns Hospital, he's been able to identify that there were certain members of the human race who were susceptible to alcohol, the rest were not. And that these people who became true alcoholics had something different about them, about their body. That alcohol affected them differently from other people. That they were allergic to alcohol. He also discovered that there was something he called the phenomenon of craving, which would take effect immediately upon ingesting alcohol, if you were an alcoholic. And beyond that, he found that alcoholics had a form of mental disease, a form of insanity. This insanity would manifest itself as obsession and compulsion to drink, even in light of all the experience of the past, even in light of the knowledge that what a drink would do and what the next drunk could produce in terms of not only loss of family, position, jobs, money, loss of health, and getting closer and closer to death. He also discovered in the course of his 30 years that the disease of alcoholism was progressive, and it seemed to progress whether the alcoholic was drinking or not. He found out that there was no cure for alcoholism. No cure. It was a disease without a cure. And Lord knows he had tried in every possible way to effect a cure, with every means at his disposal, and he had the foremost rehabilitation hospital in the world at that time. They tried aversion therapy. They tried to make Pavlovian dogs out of their patients. That didn't work. They tried belladonna therapy, which is a type of poison. They tried psychiatry. They tried teaching the alcoholic what was wrong with him or her. So the theory being that if he or she knew why they drank, it was easy to stop drinking. They tried to cure them by finding out where was their insanity and how did we deal with that. And they used all the human solutions they had at their disposal. Cold baths and hot baths and all kinds of different therapies, hypnosis. Acupuncture hadn't hit this country yet, I don't think. But nevertheless, none of these things worked. And there were a certain number of his patients who had to be shoved off to the side as being chronic and incurable. So he knew what he was talking about. Now, how does that relate to the program? It's very simple. The knowledge he gave us allowed us to put together the whole synergy. That if we are alcoholic, that is, if we are chronic alcoholic, we have a disease which is invariably fatal and is incurable and is progressive. Which means quite simply that if we do not stop drinking, we will die. Or perhaps go insane first and be locked up where we can't drink ourselves to death. And there's no hope. There's no way that medical science or science in any form can help us. The problem is that though we know we must stop, though we have been told if you do not stop drinking, you will die, we can't stop. So Dr. Silkworth had identified the powerlessness. You begin to see how all this fits directly into our program. Dr. Silkworth pioneered all this for us. He saw that we were powerless to stop drinking on our own. He saw that a part of the syndrome of the disease of alcoholism, one of the major symptoms, was denial. Our minds would deny the existence of a problem. He often said alcoholism is the only fatal, incurable disease I know of which denies its own existence. And beyond that, he found that we were crazy. We were insane. We were afflicted with an obsession and a compulsion to drink, which was beyond our power. That when it came time for us to drink, if we could get alcohol, we were going to drink. He discovered those strange mental blank spots that Fred talked about in his story in chapter 3. He found out just exactly what Roland Hazard had experienced. Remember, Roland is the guy who spent a year with Dr. Dr. Johnson. Young. Helen did a senior moment, guys, for you. Roland spent a year with Dr. Young in Switzerland. And Dr. Young taught Roland everything he needed to know about why he drank, tore him apart, and gave him a whole new psyche. And Roland came back to the United States and very shortly was drunk again. And when he went back to see Dr. Young said, Roland, there's nothing I can do for you. Nothing but a complete psychic change in the nature of a total emotional displacement is going to help you. And I don't know how to give that to you. So Dr. Silkworth was aware of this. He knew from his vast experience that there was no way to teach an alcoholic enough about themselves that they would stop drinking. Yes?
Did you say that did Silkworth actually treat Roland Hazard? He treated him?
No, but and I'm not suggesting he even knew Roland until later, because Roland they became acquainted later. It may have been before Silkworth wrote his opinion, I'm not sure. It was sometime in the late 30s. But he wasn't aware of Roland's sojourn in Switzerland until later. But he had already discovered for himself the truth of what Dr. Young discovered, that there was nothing he could do for the chronic alcoholic. And they were going to have this massive psychic change if there was any hope of recovery. So here we find then the basic dilemma for the alcoholic. We are going to die if we don't stop drinking, and we can't stop drinking. Ergo, therefore, we're going to die. Now for each of us in here, there are 10 or 12 people out there who are going to die. They're not here, and they probably never will be. they're not going to have the miracle worked in their lives that's been worked in our lives. What Dr. Silkworth then discovered, because he spent the next 3 years after Bill Wilson was finally out of this hospital, observing what was happening with these AA guys. He saw firsthand his hopeless cases, the ones that were bound to die because he couldn't help them. He saw them recovering. And he saw what was happening. He saw Bill and the others coming into his hospital and talking to these hopeless, helpless cases and spending a couple of days talking to them. Then he noticed they were praying together. A couple of days later, the hopeless case would get up and walk out of his hospital. A month later, he'd be in there working with the next guy. So Silkworth saw this with his own eyes. He was astounded at first, of course, because what was happening there was something way beyond his experience. He knew that every once in a while, every once in a great while, there would be some kind of a spontaneous recovery, which couldn't be explained in any way. That happened very rarely. And so, over the course of the years from 1934 through 1939, Dr. Silkworth was not a direct participant, but he was a very interested observer of what was going on. And therefore, he realized that though he had posed a problem which appeared to have no answer, the dilemma of the alcoholic, if you don't stop drinking, you're going to die, but you can't stop drinking. Well, that's a state that all of us find ourselves in when we get here. Then he saw that there was a solution. That solution was not one which fit into any scientific model, because it dealt entirely in the realm of the spirit, the spiritual. And so when he was asked to write this opinion, they knew, and he knew, that he would be laying the groundwork, the foundation upon which AA came to be. Let's go back just a little bit and see further how this happened. Bill Wilson was in his hospital 3 times. And the second time that Bill was there, Dr. Silkworth informed his wife, Lois, that Bill could not be helped, that he was going to die within a year if he didn't stop drinking. And there was nothing more that Silkworth could do. Bill stayed sober for a little while after that, probably just on fear, but one of the things that we've discovered, and we'll go over this in great detail as we move along, the fear of the consequences of drinking doesn't keep us sober. It may for a little while, but that's not the solution. That's why those who are fear-mongers around the rooms are clear out to lunch. As a matter of fact, they're extremely dangerous people because they're offering a solution which is not a solution. And the people who believe them are being pushed in front of buses every day. The fear of the consequences of drinking won't keep us sober. Keeping it green is a myth. If you can't remember your last drunk, there's an even worse myth. And all of these beautiful little sayings that pull around all the time are not only useless, they're very dangerous, because they feature a false story. They're a lie. We don't stay sober on the fear of the consequences of drinking. Bill wasn't able to, and after a while he got drunk again. Now after Evie had come to him and Bill had gone through the first 2 steps, and we'll get to that in his story, we'll see how that happened. He went back into Towns Hospital, and Dr. Silkworth watched him right from the very beginning. He detoxed him, and then Evie came in and showed Bill how to work steps. And Bill worked steps 3 through 11, with the exception of 10, right there in the hospital. And he reports all that on page 13 in his story. While he was still there, he was inspired to understand he was going to have to carry this message. And step 12 was presented to him by inspiration. He said that the thought came to me, he said in his story. And it was after that then that he began to take the message of the steps out. And for 6 months he was unsuccessful. Nobody got sober. Enter Dr. Silkworth again. If it hadn't been for him, I promise you, we wouldn't be here. There'd be no way. Silkworth explained to Bill what he was doing wrong and how he was going to have to alter his method of approaching newcomers. Bill did that. It worked with Dr. Bob, and the rest, they say, is history. So when we look then at Dr. Silkworth's opinion, we're looking at something which is monumental. This opinion has now appeared in print in 40 or 50 million books in 26 languages. And in 1947, the American Medical Association said, yep, you're right. Alcoholism is a disease. Kind of strange, you know, at the very same time, the American Medical Association also discovered that hypoglycemia was a disease. And if you're not aware of it now, you will be as a sponsor, because every once in a lot of times you're going to find that your new people are seriously hypoglycemic. That alcohol does a lot of damage to pancreas. It seriously disrupts the islets of Langerhans, which produce insulin. So that they become super sensitized to carbohydrates. And it's very easy for us to overproduce insulin and then drive our blood sugar down. And as soon as our blood sugar gets low enough, we know that a drink will work. A drink will make us feel better. One of the major problems with early recovery is that so many new people are seriously hypoglycemic. They don't know it. And we're telling them, many of us are telling them exactly the wrong thing. We're telling them eat a lot of sugar, drink a lot of coffee. Nothing could be worse. Coffee having caffeine drives blood sugar down because it drives the production of insulin. Loading ourselves up with sugar makes us feel good for about half an hour, and then we drop off the end of the cliff. We get that terrible feeling of depression, and we begin to hyperventilate, and our hearts become rhythmic, and begin to sweat. We know that if we drink something, we're going to feel good instantaneously. And we've been knowing that for a long time, you see, because this hypoglycemia has been long before we came into the program. We learned a long time ago that we feel better immediately if we drink. And so we need to help the new people to understand that they need a different kind of diet, and they need to keep something in their stomach. They need to have small meals 5 or 6 times a day. And they need to stay away from coffee. We're just the opposite. We load them up on exactly what's going to kill them. And feed them all kinds of sweet stuff. But anyway, that's something we will address at an appropriate time. But you'll hear me mention this quite often because it's endemic. This is not something which happens occasionally. It's all around us. And many of you will recognize what I'm saying because you went through the symptoms of hypoglycemia when you came in here. Maybe you didn't know it. But those massive depressions that would hit you all at once, and you knew damn well if you drank you'd feel better. You had to sweat it out. Sometimes we just couldn't sweat it out anymore. The real problem is that we were taking things into our body which were killing us, and we didn't know it. There's nobody bothered to tell us, or knew to tell us, I guess is a better way to put it. So in any event, by the time Dr. Silkworth got around to the point of writing this opinion, he was well versed in what was going on, not only in the symptoms and the symptomology of the disease of alcoholism, but also by that time in recovery, spiritual recovery, not psychological recovery, not physical recovery, not electroshock therapy, not behavior modification. No such thing as aversion therapy ever worked. If any of you have ever taken antabuse, you know what I'm talking about. when the obsession to drink alcohol hits, you're going to drink right through that stuff, even though it generally kills you. You do it anyway.
One for me on that.
So that's, you know, we know all this. We've all experienced these things in one form or another. And as sponsors, you get to run into this constantly. So then, when they were writing this book, they all said, we got to get Silkworth into this thing because, you see, at that point, they felt a little bit shaky about whether anybody's going to believe them. After all, there were only about 100 of them. They felt they needed some credibility. But more than that, Bill had become very friendly with the little doctor, he called him. And he realized that Dr. Silkworth could be the key to everything. Because Silkworth would set the table. Here you are, Mr. or Ms. Alcoholic. You got this disease, and here's the description of it. And if you're an alcoholic, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's going to kill you unless you stop, and you can't stop. So therefore, you're going to die unless you find some way to stop. Aha. Let's go a little bit further in this book, and we find a method of recovery, which, by the way, never fails. Never fails. So anybody who will put the time and effort into it and follow the directions in the big book. And I know that for a fact. Dr. Bob wrote that in his story, and I believe him. I know he's right. It never failed, he said. If we go about it with one half the deal, we just go back getting our next drink. He's right. So what they did, they asked Dr. Silkworth to give them a letter. They didn't ask him at first for an opinion. So can you give us some kind of a letter that we can put in our book which will show that that you have confidence and faith in what we're saying here, and that you watched it work yourself, and you know that this is not just some kind of imagination or piping. So, let's go to page Roman 25 or 23, depending upon what edition you have. If you're in the 4th edition, it's page 25. If you're in the 3rd edition, page 23. XXIII or XXV. The doctor's opinion. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. You see what they were doing here? They were looking for backup. They were looking for a medical guy to back them up and say, yeah, this stuff is right, this is good. For the plan of recovery described in this book. So it wasn't just that they wanted backup for the ideas about alcoholism, but that they wanted backup for the plan of recovery which they are presenting here. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who've had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. Now that's just simply describing Dr. Silkworth. There may have been other guys out there, other medical guys, but what they're doing really here is describing the one man they knew for a fact had extensive experience with alcoholics and also extensive experience with the recovery from alcoholism practiced by AA. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital, specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. Well, this is what they had asked him for initially. To whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. Now, late 1934 was in December of 1934, and this was Bill's 3rd trip to Towns Hospital. Remember, Dr. Silkworth had pronounced him as incurable after his 2nd trip, and told him nothing more he could do to help him. But Bill had checked back in because he knew he had to detox. He was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. Now, Dr. Silkworth was treating him for recovery, probably shooting him up with a large number of various drugs and stuff to bring him down. Feeding him food, you know, giving him rest, whatever else they're doing, I don't know. But that's when Ebby showed up there at the hospital. And Ebby brought the steps of the Oxford group to Bill while he was there in the hospital. He acquired certain ideas concerning possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conception to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. See, Dr. Silkworth has skipped everything now that happened while Bill was in the hospital, except that he had acquired certain ideas. Now he's talking about Bill's out of the hospital now, and Dr. Silkworth is calling this rehabilitation. Impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This refers initially to what Bill was inspired to understand and believe when he was still in the hospital. And we find that on page 14 and 15 in Bill's story. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. Notice he includes the families, which we damn sure don't do today. Shame on us. To family disease. Oh, but they are not alcoholics. They can't come to our meetings. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. I personally know scores of cases who were type with whom other methods have failed completely. Now he's referring to the people who came directly out of his hospital. Because they'd go in there and they'd ask for the most hopeless cases he had, and those are the ones they went to work on. And these guys, over a period of 3 years, were going out by, and he talks about scores of people, 20, maybe 60, 80 people, with whom other methods have failed completely, and he means they're his methods. He's talking about scientific stuff, medical stuff, psychiatric stuff, all of that has failed. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance. Because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group, they may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. How prophetic could he have been? 100 then when he wrote this, millions now, millions. And what they were doing with the alcoholic had been spread to all over the world, and in almost anything you can think of, the affliction of the human being, especially afflictions which involve the mind. These men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. Now here's a sentence which I would love to have as my epitaph. I'm not ready to die yet, by the way, but I wouldn't mind if this were my epitaph. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Now then, what a wonderful thing. Now let's see how that applies. Remember, we go back to the board of the first edition, and there they tell us that to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this volume. That therefore, the big book is a history, a recitation of the recovery saga of those who wrote the book. And Dr. Silkworth is saying, to anyone who picks this up to read it, you may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Believe what they're telling you. This is what they did, and this is what happened. And that was precisely the endorsement that these guys needed. Because it'd be so easy in 1940 to poo-poo this book. Why hell's bells there are. I can think of 200 people that I know about just here in this general area who do exactly that. They're still doing it. Talking about the big book as if it was some kind of a passe pile of horse puppies. All the modern stuff is there now. We've learned all these things, and we don't have to think or worry about an old book that was written by a bunch of old white guys, old waspy white guys, sitting around and smoking their cigars, philosophizing about life. Who cares about what they wrote? Modern science will give us the answer now. By the way, give me another pill. The answer got to be maintenance, right?
Right.
Put me on a maintenance program of some kind. And that way I'll be just fine. Very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD. If you don't want your life changed, guys, don't work the steps. Just stay away from those rascals because they do all kinds of screwy things. So anyway, we also have a meeting at 9:15 every Saturday night, which is a language of the heart meeting. The cover's gone from my book, but that's kind of what it looks like without a cover. And we take one of the articles that Bill wrote, and we read it, or part of it, and then discuss what we've read. It's a really, really nice, interesting meeting. Everybody gets involved. Okay, let's go to page 26, XXVI. Get with it here, son.
Thank you. Push the switch up.
Huh? What? You
I
okay?
think your hands, when your finger comes down, it pushes it off.
Oh, wow. I gotta watch that. All right. So let's go, now we're going to read the introduction here to the doctor's opinion. Remember that they got this letter that we just read first, and then they said, boy, this guy really, he could really help us. Let's see if we can get him to write something further. So they said the physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. Huh.
Didn't hold back.
Yeah. All subject to recall. These things were true to some extent, in fact to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. Now thereby hangs a tale too, guys, because these rooms are filled with people who are not alcoholics. They have got into a lot of trouble with alcohol. They ran into a judge who believed in AA or a PO or a boss. They don't have the physical allergy. And these are people who really get along quite well without the steps of the big book. And if they have sufficient reason to stop drinking, they can do so. Or they may even be able to go on a kind of a maintenance diet of booze too, and just not say anything about it. Because AA is a very attractive place for a lot of people to be. First time in their lives that they had an opportunity to be welcomed with open arms, to have people love them unconditionally, and to admire them for the times that they spend sober, and to give them full credence and credibility, which they probably never had in their lives. So they'll stick around. The problem there is that some of them want to push their own program of recovery in lieu of the big book of the steps, and are quite adamant about it. You get quite angry when somebody suggests they might not be carrying the message which is needed by the alcoholic. But we can't help that. They are entitled to be members. They're members when they say they are. The only requirement being a desire to stop drinking. Those people who are not alcoholics but who nevertheless work the steps and work them in their lives have precisely the same results as an alcoholic has. Their lives change. They change dramatically. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy is to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may of course mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as the altruistic plane. By the way, the word altruistic, is anybody who does not know what that means? Okay, altruism is tantamount to benevolent giving without expectation of return, charity. All of those, they're not strictly synonymous. Altruism has a clear meaning all of its own, but it basically means that we are there to be helpful without expecting anything in return for our help. But we worked out our solution on the spiritual as well as the altruistic plane. We favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he's approached, as he has then a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. Well, it's amazing. AA has probably been the major progenitor, the major driving force behind the establishment of detox centers and rehabilitation hospitals, and all that whole thing that's built up. You see, in 1970, it was members of AA primarily who pushed through the Congress a bill establishing the National Council on Alcoholism and funding the establishment of treatment centers. And they started springing up, and care centers out in California established 3 units out there almost immediately. They saw that this was a huge profit center. However, for the first 3 years of their operation, they completely ignored AA. I mean, it was well beyond the scope of their belief system to see that these highly trained professionals were helpless in the face of the alcoholic dilemma. And so for 3 years, their recidivism rate was 100%. They didn't get anybody sober. Finally, they discovered they better start introducing these people to AA. And of course, at that point, they began to show considerable success. Since then, AA has been a contributing factor to recovery throughout the system of rehab hospitals, some more than others. A lot depends on who's in charge of the hospital and how much influence the professionals in the hospital have, because many of them are extremely nervous about AA and they don't like the idea that their professional degrees and credentials and training may not be sufficient. And so they're very loath to accept the help of AA. There are others that ask for our help all the time. Put the two together and you got an unbeatable combination. And I'll tell you why. It is absolutely imperative that the alcoholic learn a great deal about themselves. And for those without any hospitalization, without any help from professionals, will generally receive as much information about themselves as is absolutely necessary by doing their 4th and 5th step. However, the professionals can help tremendously by aiding the process of self-knowledge. But they need to understand that self-knowledge in and of itself will not keep us sober. See, that's the problem. It isn't that the professionals don't know what they're doing, or that they're incapable of helping. It's that there's a missing ingredient here. It does not seem to matter how much knowledge we have about ourselves. If the spiritual problem is not solved, we don't recover. But you put the two together in the hands of a first-class professional with thorough training who understands that this is a step in a very important and positive step in the direction of recovery. Then it becomes a partnership that really works. And we see that happening all the time. And there are a lot of hopeful signs out there, especially since the belt has been tightened up considerably and it's no longer possible to just feed at the trough of the public purse in order to run one of these rehab places. More, and these insurance companies have tightened up on their requirements. And so now it's really, really important to have a high degree of success that can be pointed at with pride. And that comes about through the combination of treatment and AA. Ultimately, it is finding God and getting God to stand between us and the booze, which is the solution. The self-knowledge can be critically important if it's used in the right way. So now then, the doctor was asked to write, and he writes what we now call his opinion. And this begins on page Roman 27, XXVII. The subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. It was therefore a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. Thank you, Doctor. We doctors realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern methods, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. That's very powerful language. The powers of good, which lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Dr. Silk was recognizing that when he talks about synthetic, he's talking about those things which man has produced, has ideated, has experimented with, has written about, and have taught, and has been accepted as being the truth about any professional endeavor. He calls it synthetic. And I suppose if you wanted to compare that word, you would compare it with spiritual. The spiritual knowledge, or knowledge of the Spirit, or knowledge of how to come into the world of Spirit, these are things beyond the pale of the scientific. So he's acknowledging that here. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. He's talking about Bill Wilson, of course. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in the alcoholic field. They believe in themselves, and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. You notice that Dr. Silkworth has capitalized the word power. Wherever you see a word like that capitalized, that means higher power or deity. The use of the capital letter indicates a reference to a deity. Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor. And this often requires a definite hospital procedure. For of course, psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. This next paragraph is of extreme importance. It ties in directly with the first step. And I'll show you why in just a minute. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. That the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So a chronic alcoholic, in accordance with the doctor's opinion, is a human being who has an allergy to alcohol and never occurs in other classes of people. Some people talk about this being a wild gene that we have, or it's some hereditary thing. There's some evidence that suggests that that's true. We used to call AA, we used to call AA CIA, Catholic Irish Alcoholics. It seemed that every other person was Catholic and Irish. Certainly there seemed to be a predisposition to alcoholism among what we now refer to as Amerins. You don't know that word, we used to call them Indians. Now Native Americans, American Indians, they are known scientifically as Amerins, A-M-E-R-I-N-D-S. There's a high essence of alcoholism among them. Same is true if you were to go to Russia. I was there before AA was permitted there, when it was still behind the curtain. And we were permitted to go to a hospital which was attached to a huge factory. And in fact, we employed something like 100,000 people. And this hospital was like an open ward clinic. I don't know how many beds there were there, but it seemed to me on 3 floors it was hundreds. And all the people lying in those beds were chronic alcoholics. Alcoholism was a major endemic problem in Russia. And we found something very interesting when we were there. There was AA being practiced in Russia at that time. There was no big book in Russian. They were using the big book in French and especially in German. It had been translated in those languages by that time. And there were some pretty strong little cells of AA springing up. And people were getting sober. Now, of course, the big book is in Russian, and you go to Russia these days, you find AA everywhere. But it seemed that alcoholism was a huge problem there. Now this next sentence, this next sentence is the key to a major part of the first step. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Let's go back to the first phrase. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. Now, if you turn to page 30, you'll see how this fits in. See, one of the misconceptions that floats around here all the time is that the way we determine whether we're an alcoholic or not is to determine that our lives are unmanageable. That's balderdash. It's total nonsense. In fact, there are some recovery methods now that start out that way, answering 497 questions in longhand about why my life is unmanageable, as if somehow this is to prove that we're alcoholic. And I venture to say that 99% of the human beings in this world can't manage their own lives. If we first started out with the premise that God's in charge and we're not, those who are trying to manage their lives are making a botch of it by definition. So what is it that is truly part of the first step? Well, there's a little paragraph, the second paragraph on page 30, that defines the first step. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. That means that the walls of denial have been broken down and that we've been given the gift, a true gift, of understanding and acceptance of the fact that we're alcoholics. And then it goes on to say, the delusion that we are like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. If you go up to the paragraph above, go 4 lines down from the top of that first paragraph, therefore, it is not surprising our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it in the gates of insanity or death. Now we see what the rest of the story is as far as first step. We're going to have to accept what we came to read back here, Dr. Soper's opinion. Please go back to that page. That's XXVIII, Roman 28. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. In other words, the first step requires of us not only that we be granted the gift of acceptance and concession to our innermost selves that we're alcoholic without any reservation whatsoever, but also that we not only understand but accept as being true that we'll never safely drink alcohol again the rest of our lives. The plug is in the jug. Now there's a very powerful corollary to this. Those who believe they have worked the first step or have been told by their sponsors they've worked the first step, but who still carry a lurking reservation that at some time in the future they will be well enough that they'll be able to drink successfully. A drink or two here and a drinky poo or there, here or there, and just enjoy life a little bit. No more problems with alcohol. I can just, I don't intend to devote my life to this kind of sobriety. There's no point in it. But for right now, I'll go along with the gag. And that lurking reservation will determine that they can never safely work, never successfully work the steps. Because you see, so long as I'm working the steps with the idea that I'm going to drink again someday, that I should be able to, if I choose, destroys the total efficacy of the steps. And so many people who believe they worked the steps and told by the sponsors they worked the steps, and who later relapse, or are not, particularly those who are not able to keep going with the steps. There's just not enough impetus there. There's not enough encouragement there in their own thinking. They don't make it. And a lot of them go, I tried that egg stuff and it don't work. Give me another drink. But here's the answer. And it's something which you as sponsors must impress deeply upon your sponsees right from the get-go. That it is essential to accept as a fact that you can never safely drink alcohol in any form again so long as you live. Why? Because you will have the allergy for your lifetime. And 3 years from now or 30 years from now, if you take a drink, it will set off the phenomenon of craving and you will not be able to stop. And once you get started, it is unlikely that you'll ever see the light of day again. And that's the truth. So now you know what the first step really is. And it's right here in the book. It's never been anywhere else. The human solutionists and those who don't pay attention to the big book have twisted the first step around until it's meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. You cannot prove to another human being that they're an alcoholic by showing them their life is unmanageable by them. This simply is not true. As a matter of fact, you want to know where unmanageability really comes in the steps? It comes in the third step. Our troubles we think of our own name. They arise out of ourselves. The alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will-run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must or it kills us. And it goes on to say that we can't get rid of it ourselves, but that God can if we seek Him and seek His help. And then it says, So now we see that we're going to have to quit playing God because it didn't work. In other words, we're going to have to stop with the illusion that somehow or another our life is manageable by us. And therefore, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be the director. He would be the principal, we the agent, He the father, and we the child. You see why that happened? And so in the third step, we come to understand the meaning of unmanageability. Because we tried to manage our lives ourselves and it didn't work, and all it did was get us into deeper and deeper trouble. Because it was a manifestation of self. And when our minds are full of self, we're denying the place for God. That's what happened. This next paragraph, we're going to take this and we'll close it up. Very important again. Dr. Silk was such an erudite man, so profound, he just knew what he was talking about. Frothy, emotional appeal seldom suffices. What do you suppose he's talking about there? Oh, your poor family, don't you care about what's going on with them? Don't you care about yourself? Are you so immoral and so debauched that you won't stop drinking? You're just going to go right on killing yourself? This kind of stuff. What kind of employee do you think you are? I'm paying you all this good money and all you do is come wandering in here hungover and drunk. Haven't I been good to you? Haven't I tried to help you? And then the government. Well, from cradle to grave, we're taking care of you. This is the way you pay us back, by getting drunk all the time. And our friends, it's all the same thing. Moralizing and preaching and threatening and cajoling. And none of it ever worked. Doesn't work. We may feel a little sheepish for a while, but we get over it as soon as we have another drink. So frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. And that, damn it, does not mean just don't drink and go to me. And if your ass falls off, put it in a little red wagon and drag it to a meeting too. which will interest and hold these people must have depth and weight. That's what we find in here. Precisely. A message of recovery which leads us to a spiritual awakening, which leads us to spiritual recovery first. And following spiritual recovery, we then experience mental and physical recovery. And that's the way it really works. Okay, guys, I'm going to thank you. I want to thank you for being here. Remind you, we're back here at 7:30.